Hi everyone, I'm Jessica Benner, a PhD candidate in the School of Computing and Informatics at the University of Pittsburgh. This is going to be a short video about resumes, and it's going to give you some tips for creating a good resume. First, every resume has some basic components. You should have your name and your contact information. There should be usually a succinct summary statement of your skills, previous experiences, or career goals. The bulk of the resume is going to be your work experience. You'll also want to include your education, and if you have received any awards or you have any affiliations. So if we look to the right of the screen, we can see here on sample number 5 that where it says sample number 5 is where your name would go, and then there's some contact information, which is an address, cell phone number, and an email address. This resume has a summary, and they call it Summary of Qualifications. And here they say 3 little sentences or sub-sentences about what kinds of experiences that they have and what kind of skills they have developed over time. Then the next section is the employment, what they call employment history. And here they've listed several employers and on the left and bullet points on the right indicating what they did at each of those jobs. And next they have their education and some professional affiliations. So while this resume does have all of the basic components listed here to the left, it doesn't look very nice. It's a little bit hard to read because of the way it's structured, and there are too many bullet points in some of these work experiences. But these are the basic components that you should have in your resume once you finish creating it or updating it. Each of us have had lots of different work experiences and educational experiences and service experiences and community experiences, but resumes need to be kept to 1 page. So we need to figure out what to emphasize so we can fit our various experiences that are relevant into a single page. And we do that by asking, what's the purpose of the resume? So is the resume to get a particular job? Then we might want to emphasize relevant work experience that we have that applies to this job we want to get. Is it maybe to get into graduate school? A lot of you have just finished retooling your resume probably to get into the program. So you probably emphasized relevant educational experiences that you had in your undergrad or other previous master's degrees or other degrees. And you probably added some of your work experience that would be relevant for you towards the program. You could also be tailoring your resume to get a paid internship. And here you might emphasize the relevant experiences for that. So you get the idea. So every resume has a purpose. And by knowing the purpose of the resume, then we can figure out what's important to emphasize. So essentially you want to tailor the experiences that you include out of this large set of experiences that you have had to the purpose of the particular resume that you're designing. And you might want to also consider having a full version of your resume. So you've got a resume that's multiple pages long and it has every work experience you've ever had, every educational experience you've ever had, every social organization or professional organization you've ever belonged to. And then what you can do is when you find a job or you're going to go on to more graduate school or you find an internship or something you want to apply for that requires a resume, then you can mix and match and pull from this full version of your resume, and that way you never lose any information. So you've got this full version and you just pick out the pieces that are relevant for the particular thing that you're going to use your resume for at this moment. There are some key areas of the resume when it comes to people reviewing the resume. Okay? So the basic components that I gave you are the components that you're going to create and have in your resume. But there are some key areas that are important in organizing your resume that research has shown are important areas where employers or potential employers are going to look. So the images on the right here are showing a heat map. And if the area is white, that means the potential employers who are reviewing the resume here didn't look at that area. If it's blue, they glanced at it. If it's yellow, they looked longer. And if it's red, they looked for a longer time. And so this is the result of an eye tracking study where hiring professionals, potential employers, were recorded while they were looking over resumes. And they didn't know that they were being tracked. Their eyes were being tracked and they were being timed on how long they looked. So they found that on average, these professionals looked at each resume for about 6 seconds. 6 seconds. So you've got 6 seconds on average to be able to convey your experiences and how they match up to the experiences of the thing you're applying for, the position you're applying for. And one tool that we have from this study is we can see which areas were most commonly viewed. So obviously they looked at the person's name. They spent a lot of time at the current employer and the previous employer. They looked at the dates that that people had currently been employed for and previously been employed for, and they looked at the education. So some takeaways from this study is that the beginning of each section of your resume is an important area. So if we notice here under professional experience, they spent a lot of time here in this top area, which is obviously the current employer. And they spent some time over here under professional experience in this top bullet section. So making sure that the sections are shorter and that you've got the key information or even a summary information at the beginning of each section that has the key information that you want them to find is important. And also the top section, which is this section right here and right here, is, as you can see, has much more dwell time, much more time looking in this section, can be thought of as prime real estate. So if you're going to have a summary that says what your previous qualifications are, what you're looking for, what you're interested in, this kind of thing, you're going to want to have it in that prime real estate area. Or if there's a particular work experience that you want to make sure they see, you're going to put it in that top area. And then the final takeaway is, in this case, the education is all the way at the bottom, and they spent a long time looking here. So they're going to find your education. Most people tend to put their name and then they put their education second. By knowing that this real estate here is pretty important and that the potential employer is going to find your education wherever it is, it frees up this area here to have more pertinent summary statement or specific professional experience that might set you apart from the other applicants. And if you want to read about the study, there's a link here at the bottom. Let's look at a couple samples. So the sample here on the left, it's just sample number 6. You can see they've got the education at the top there. The most unique thing about this resume is that they've got a table where they discuss their computer skills. And this is sort of a nice, clean way to present the different computer software that this person knows how to use. So if they're going for a position where they're going to need to know how to use various types of software, then this is a wonderful way to display that knowledge and that experience. Then if you look under experience, you see that there's a long bulleted list. So this actually is way too many experiences to be relaying, or way too many bullet points to describe what they've done as a research analyst at this university. They should, be able to distill that into a smaller set of experiences, and we'll talk about that in the next slide. On the right side, we see here we have sample resume 7, and this one is very nicely laid out. I think the layout of this one feels very professional. It's very clear. It's easy to look at and read. They have their experience labeled. So if you see the one on the left, sample 6, they just have the title as experience. Whereas the resume on the right has a section on professional experience and one on leadership experience. So this is delineating that they have different experiences. Some are professional and some are leadership experiences. So if this was a resume that was going to be used to get a position which required leadership or management experience, then it's a really good idea to single out a section focused on leadership experience. And again, they have their education and on the right side. And another unique, nicely done section of resume number 7 on the right here is they have a section called specialized skills. And so this is similar to the section on computer skills on the left side. However, it's a little more generic and allows them to add things like software, databases, other kinds of training, social media experience, and even their language proficiency. So depending on what kind of position you're going to go for, you might want to have, some more all-rounded skills like the resume on the right, or you might want to have the specific ones like the computer skills on the left. But it's important to have some section where you're giving sort of this kind of overview set of skills, or you can have it as the summary, as I mentioned before. Now, earlier in the left example in the previous slide, I mentioned that the bullet list was way too long. And it's common that we all have done around 10 different activities at one of our jobs, or at most of our jobs. But on a resume, we need to minimize the number of bullets to the work experience because we need to make it easy to read, and we need the potential employer to be able to pick out the important thing that you've done at that experience that's relevant to the thing that you want to do at the new position. So some questions to ask here is, you might ask yourself, what were the 3 most important things that I did at that job? And you can do this. You can take the existing resume that you have now, and if you have too many bullets, or even if you have too few bullets, you might only have 1 bullet under a certain job. You might want to go through each of those jobs and ask yourself, what were the 3 most important things that I did at that job? Or important experiences that I got at that job? Or important skills that I developed at that job? And then you might want to ask next, what is the most relevant experience that I did at that job that relates to the purpose of this current resume that I'm building? You might have, if you decide to have your full reference resume, which includes all of your experiences, you might have the 3 most important things that you did at each job, or you might have 5 because you can have more space. And then when you develop the tailored resume that's going to go for applying for a job, or applying for a graduate school, or applying for an internship or some other experience, then you're going to distill it into these relevant experiences for that particular job or position that you're trying to get. And another important thing related to distilling your experience is that you probably have some relevant experiences that are general skills. For example, you learned how to use certain software tools. You learned how to speak certain language. You learned how to do good customer service and other skills. So these skills are general skills that are worth mentioning, and they might not end up as a bullet point underneath of that particular job, but they might end up in this skills section that's at the top or the bottom of your resume that indicates that you have these general skills. So if you've got bullet points that talk about some of these general skills, you might think about removing them from the underneath the specific experience where you have them listed and put them in a general specialized skills or skills section. But don't discount them because they're actually pretty important skills. It's pretty important to have general skills like this, like good writing skills, good communication skills, customer service skills, depending on the kind of position you're applying for. Okay, here are a couple more examples. I'm sorry that they're a little bit blurry, but you can get the basic idea. Looking at the sample one on the left here, you can see that actually both of these have a nice layout. So it's pretty clear where the different sections are, and they've done a good job of using bolded text and lines to delineate various types of information. So looking at this back at the sample on the left, we can see this resume has the education at the top. Then they have a section called library experience where they've picked out the experiences that they have that relate to working in the library. And then they have another section on other work experience. And then they have one on leadership and activities, and then a section at the bottom on skills where they've delineated computer skills and language skills as two kinds of skills that they have. The section on library experience is pretty clear. These jobs relate to working in a library. However, the section on other work experience, it's actually not very clear what these positions are doing in the resume. What are they helping? If you look at inside the list, you can see that some of these are related to doing research. So perhaps if the position they're applying for had some component related to research, they might have a section on research experience. But it's not very helpful to have a section that's just called other work experience. It's more helpful to pick out experiences that you've done, that you have, that are related to each other, like they did with the library experience, and have a section on that. Let's look at the right side example, which is called sample 2. So here they have, in the prime real estate area that I talked about earlier, they've got their career summary. So this talks about the basic skills that they have and the different experiences that they have. And then they've got their education, and they have a section called professional experience. But it is definitely better than saying other work experience. And then they have writing experience where they have some publications. And perhaps that's useful if they're applying for a position where they need to write. They need to show that they're a good writer. Another thing that might be important to mention at this point is having a resume that's chronological. So I think that's probably the first argument that many of you were making to the video when I said that you should tailor your experience and not include all of your experiences. You just pick out the experiences that are relevant for a position and not list everything that you've done. You probably said, well, I have a gap. I'm going to have a gap in my work history then. So, I worked I worked in a library, or I worked in an archive, or I worked in for higher education, or wherever you worked for several years. And then there were 2 years where I went and I did something else. And then I came back, and now I'm trying to build up my experience. So I don't want to show this 2-year gap. Well, my answer to that would be you can take care of discussing the gap in your resume in your cover letter. You give a tailored resume that looks sharp, that's got relevant experiences, and then in the cover letter you say that in the resume, that there's a 2-year gap, and that it's because you were doing this other thing, but your focus is currently to do this other kind of work, and that's why that relates to previous work you've done, and that's why you're emphasizing that in the resume. Something like that. If you need help writing that language, you can send me an email, and I'll help you in the cover letter. Or I'm sure you could find some resources online. So don't worry about having a chronological resume. It's more important that you're able to pick out and or distill relevant experiences for the position that you want to obtain. That's it for this video. I tried to provide you with some basic tips for creating a good resume. I hope it was helpful, and if you have more questions, please send me an email at jgb14@pitt.edu. Thanks.